So first witness was Nicholas Leflour. He was the first law enforcement officer on the scene, very young. I think he'd only been a cop for 2 years or so when he got there. And frankly, his performance reflects that. Now, on the witness stand, he was incredibly low energy. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, he was about at 1/2 of energy. What a useful witness for the state. He did talk quite a bit about how they put up crime scene tape, did crime scene stuff. So the defense wanted the jury, in their opening statement, the defense wanted the jury to believe that everyone was just treating this like an accident. No one was imagining this was a crime. The police sure were. They put crime scene tape up. They separated witnesses. They didn't do a good job of separating witnesses, but they did. They collected evidence. They were certainly treating it as a crime scene. There was body-worn camera footage from Leflour. Some of it showed Hutchins on the floor of the church, dying, shot transversely through the chest, spine broken by the bullet, and Sousa crying. I don't mean to disparage him. He'd been shot in the shoulder with the same bullet. He was in terrible pain. So crying out in pain is how I should put it. There were also lots of witnesses talking with Baldwin. They were talking with him. He was talking with them. Lots of people on their cell phones. Who are they communicating with? None of this should have been allowed by the police. None of it. Because people contaminate each other's testimony. Not maliciously. Just we begin to form our memories, especially in the immediate aftermath, when the memories are still in short-term memory before they go into long-term memory. They're very subject to manipulation, even innocent manipulation. So you shouldn't have witnesses talking to each other. You shouldn't have them on their phones. All the phones should have been taken. None of that was done. Partly, I think it was the youthfulness and inexperience of this cop, but partly there were 100, 200 people around, and it was a handful of officers. So there were limits to what they could do. I think they still could have done a better job, but regardless. That's mostly what he talked about, just his observations on the scene. Treating it like a crime scene was the important take-home from the direct questioning by the state. And that was done by Kerry Morrissey, the direct questioning of Nicholas Leflour. It was pretty undramatic. The drama comes later. Then on cross-examination, Leflour had made some statements previously where he said Baldwin seemed shocked. He seemed like an actor out of character. So these were quoted back to him. He had said, well, it didn't seem like he had intent. Even Leflour couldn't really remember what he meant by intent, but he'd said that phrase, so that was read back to him. Baldwin was detained by officers. He wasn't free to leave, but the defense made clear, and the defense here, the cross-examination was again by Alec, but he wasn't under arrest, right? Well, detention and arrest are two different things. Detention is, you stay here, we want to talk to you to determine whether or not there's probable cause a crime has been committed. Arrest is what happens after law enforcement has determined that there's probable cause that a crime has been committed. They're two different things. In fact, Alec Baldwin's never been arrested. There was never any need to arrest him. Everybody knows who he is. They know where to find him. What's he going to do? Flee the country? He was asked on cross, didn't you make mistakes? Didn't you still let witnesses talk to each other? Couldn't you have done things better? And the officer said, yeah, basically. I made all kinds of mistakes. Then the defense really dug itself a hole because they pulled out the CAD report. The CAD report is like a transcript of the 911 calls, everything that goes across like the computer or the radio communications for the officer. And the defense holds up the CAD report and says, look at this. Does it say accident here? Yeah. Accident here? Yeah. Accident here? Yeah. It says accident all over this document, doesn't it? And Leflour says, yeah, there's a lot of references to accident there. Which, of course, the defense is trying to say to the jury, hey, this wasn't a crime. This was just an accident. Worst case, this should be in civil court, not here. Well, then Kerry Morrissey comes up for redirect, and she slaughters. First of all, she touches on the question of intent because the defense put so much weight on it that Leflour said, well, he didn't seem to have intent. Is intent required for involuntary manslaughter? Is it required you intended to hurt somebody or kill somebody? No, it's not a crime of intent of the outcome. All that matters is, did you act recklessly? There's no intent of outcome required. So that's irrelevant. Then she digs into the CAD report, and it turns out this CAD report is like an amalgamation of radio calls and computer calls for everything that happened like that day. So there's vehicular accidents. There's all kinds of stuff happening that have nothing to do with Helena Hutchins. So every one of these references to accident, and she goes through, there's like 20 of them. There's like over 10 pages of this CAD report. And Kerry Morrissey just goes through each one. This one. There's an accident here, doesn't it? Leflour says, yeah, it does. Does it have anything to do with Helena Hutchins? No. The next one. Accident? Yeah. Anything to do with Helena Hutchins? No. Next one. Accident? Yeah. Anything to do with Helena? She does like 20 of these. Just, I mean, by 10, you're like, oh my God, Kerry, stop. You're just, he's dead already. He's dead. Not the witness. The witness was fine, but poor Alec Spiro. And then she asked him, well, is there even one reference to accident in this entire report? that has anything to do with Helena Hutchins? Nope, nothing. So now the defense has been caught basically outright lying to the jury. And again, that's bad, because if the jury believes that you're lying to them, why should they believe any argument you make or any evidence you present? You're acting in bad faith. That's bad for your client. Then we had the fourth witness of the day. I should say half witness, because we only got through direct of her. She wasn't cross-examined today. That'll start tomorrow morning. This was Marissa Popple, the crime scene technician, really the photographer. So she collected evidence. She did bring some evidence from the scene to the sheriff's office, but mostly she was a photographer. She did send some evidence out to be tested elsewhere. She sent the gun to the FBI for DNA testing. And of course, Alec Baldwin's DNA was found on the gun, as you would expect. And for function testing, and of course, the gun operated perfectly until the FBI broke it, when they later did this discharge testing, accidental discharge testing, and they unintentionally broke the sear and the hammer by whacking it with a mallet. They sent the ammo box that Hannah Gutierrez was using to load the gun. They sent the ammo box to the FBI for fingerprinting. She participated in the search at PDQ. There was live ammo found at PDQ. And of course, one of the defense theories in Hannah Gutierrez was that it was not Hannah who brought live ammo on the set, but that Seth Kenney provided it. But they sent the ammo found, they found one live round, intact live round on the movie set. And then they had a handful of rounds they found at Seth Kenney's that were live ammo. They sent all of them to the FBI. The FBI disassembled them. And the gunpowder from the movie set live round was obviously different, even to the naked eye, than the gunpowder from Seth Kenney. So the source of the live round on the movie set was apparently not Seth Kenney, or at least that connection could not be made on the evidence that was found. This is where they show the gun. The gun, as it came back from the FBI, broken, to the jury. The cylinder's out. The broken parts are in a little plastic case. The gun's obviously not destroyed. I mean, the gun's 99% there, so it wasn't vaporized. It's still together. It just has broken parts. They talked about on direct examination here was by Carrie Morrissey, by the way. So Carrie Morrissey and Erlinda Johnson have been going back and forth pretty regularly. The defense, not so much. Alex Spiro did everything today, but this was by Carrie Morrissey. They talked about the different kinds of dummy rounds. Some have a hole in the side. Some have BBs in them. Some have a primer removed, and the fact that no round can have all three of these. So if you have the hole in the side, the BBs tend to fall out of it, right? So there's no need to do both. If there's holes, then you have a visual confirmation it's a dummy. You don't need an audible confirmation. If there's no holes, you need an audible confirmation. So you would do one or the other, or you could remove the primer and again have a visual confirmation. And they did have one fired case with a dimpled primer, presumably, and no bullet on it. So presumably this was the fired case of the round that fired the bullet that killed Helena Hutchins. And that pretty much wrapped up direct questioning of Marissa Popple. So I expect we'll start tomorrow morning with cross-examination of Marissa Popple. I think one of the things that happened here from a practical perspective, why this death occurred, is, the gun safety rules they're highly redundant, meaning you really have to break more than one to have a bad outcome. Think about the 4 rules of gun safety. You assume every gun's loaded until you ensure otherwise, personally. You never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot. You never point the gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. And know your target and what's beyond your target. If we just focus on the first three, right? Presume the gun's loaded unless you've cleared it. Keep your finger off the trigger. Don't point at anything you don't want to destroy or kill. If you violate one of those 3, you don't have a terribly bad outcome. If you put your finger on the trigger and you discharge the gun, as long as it's pointed in a safe direction, no real harm results. Or if you put your finger on the trigger, but there's no ammo in the gun, then no harm results. If you point the gun in an unsafe direction, but you don't touch the trigger and there's no live ammo in the gun, you don't get a bad result. If you point the gun in an unsafe direction and you press the trigger, as long as there's no ammo in the gun, you don't get a bad result. So you have to violate multiple safety rules to get a bad result. By bad result, I mean, of course, the death or maiming of a person. And you can almost think of it as slices of Swiss cheese where the holes are offset from each other and they're layered. So you might go through one hole on one layer, you broke one safety rule, but there's not another hole lined up with that. So the next safety rule saves your butt. And the one after that saves your butt too, because it's also not aligned. And one consequence of this is you can develop a habit of breaking one of those safety rules all the time. Like you're sloppy with your trigger finger discipline. Your finger's always flopping on the trigger. That's bad. That's not good. Eventually you're going to depress that trigger with sufficient force to drop the hammer, drop the striker, whatever the case may be. But if the gun's never loaded and it's never pointed in an unsafe direction, you don't end up with a bad result. And so you forget that your sloppy trigger finger is a very severe safety risk. The problem with that is, what if the redundancy fails? What if you get Swiss cheese slices where the holes do line up? When you touch that trigger, it turns out there is a round in the gun this time. and it is pointed in an unsafe direction, and then you kill Helena Hutchins. So I think what might have happened, now this doesn't excuse anything. Guns are inherently dangerous instruments. If you don't handle them with due care and circumspection, people die. That's why we have involuntary manslaughter as a crime. But I'm just saying that from a practical perspective, this may be how this happened. For all we know, Alec Baldwin has always been sloppy and unsafe with guns, but he always got away with it because the safety rules are redundant. And this time he just ran out of luck. It's like the drunk driver, right? Drunk drivers don't run people home every time they drive drunk from a bar. 999 times out of 1,000, they don't run anybody over. And then that 1,000th time, they do. That doesn't make it not vehicular homicide. That doesn't make it not involuntary manslaughter. Just because it doesn't happen often, happens rarely. It's a foreseeable risk, unjustified risk of death or serious bodily injuries to other, and you're deliberately ignoring that risk when you drive drunk, and you're deliberately ignoring that risk of unjustified death to others when you take what you know to be a real gun, point it at another human being, cock the hammer, press the trigger, and you did not make sure there was no live ammo in that gun. That's what makes Baldwin's conduct involuntary manslaughter.